Welcome into the Living Force. We got an awesome show for you tonight. We got the doctors. We got Wes. We got a special guest that we are very excited to introduce you to. But I'm not going to make you wait any longer. Wes, roll the intro. Welcome, everyone, to the Living Force. Second week of that new intro. I never get tired of it, at least the second time. I'm one of your hosts, Eric Eilerson, and if it is your first time joining us, welcome. You have found the Living Force. You have found Utini, one of the most positive fan communities in the history of the Star Wars galaxy. I am joined tonight by the doctors. We have Dr. Corey Helton. Hello.
What's happening? Hello.
So excited to see you on another Monday. We also have Dr. Charles Hankel. Hey, buddy.
Hello there. I could watch that intro 100 times and I won't get tired of it because I have a lightsaber, guys.
It really does look Brad. Like I'm amazed that you got the final clip and none of the rest did, but that's fine. That's cool. I'm not upset. We also have the man behind the keys, Wes Jenkins. Hello, sir. How you doing?
What's up, guys? Good to see everybody here today.
It is good to see you too. It's good to hear you. It's just good to be around you, my friend. And we have a full house, everyone, because we also have Stephen Kent from Beltway Banthas. Stephen, welcome to the show.
Hey, nice to be here with you.
Oh, nice to have you, man. We've been trying to get you on here for a while, and schedules finally worked out. Very excited. And everyone watching, hello to you as well in the Twitch chat. Excited to hang out with you tonight. As a reminder, we do this show every Monday night, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. The audio version of the podcast is released on Thursdays for patrons and Friday on iTunes, Stitcher, etc., everywhere else. Remember to hit us up on utini.com/Discord to join in the chat fun, and over to patreon.com/Utini. Check out our Patreon. Steven, I want to ask you some questions before we get into a couple updates. I mentioned Beltway Banthas earlier, like your official title. Can you explain to our audience what Beltway Banthas is if they've been living under a rock and don't know anything?
Yeah, so Beltway Banthas is the only Star Wars podcast that I know of that is actively committed to breaking down, discussing, and engaging with the politics of Star Wars, whatever they might be, and to whatever person. So we have two purposes. One, to understand the politics within the Star Wars universe, like really understand what's going on in terms of political science, the machinations of the Republic, the Empire, etc. Really get how the galaxy works in universe. And then the other thing is to understand what Star Wars means to fans in the real world. And so I interview people who work in politics and in broadcast media and radio to understand how Star Wars impacted their life, but also impact their worldviews and still inform their worldviews. Because I don't know about you, but Star Wars for me is foundational to the way that I see the world. And I think that it is that way for many people who have a lot of influence as well.
Absolutely, man. And we're going to get into a lot of that stuff as it relates to some of our favorite books and some of our favorite characters a little later in the show. But I want to ask you first, just because it's on the top of my head, and I'm sure everyone else listening. You've been doing this show for a little bit, and 2020 has been interesting politically. Let's just say, what is it like hosting a political Star Wars podcast now versus maybe when you started? Like, could you ever have imagined something like this kind of evolving to the way it has nowadays?
Well, I never could have imagined being helming a Star Wars and politics podcast in the year that a sitting president would suggest delaying an election from its set date.
Wasn't on my bingo card, I'll tell you that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's just like punching my Republic or Follow the Republic bingo card. But nothing for me will top the chaos of 2016 and trying to launch the show in that environment and talk to people about the politics of Star Wars there. The Beltway Banthas has kind of been in a retooling of its show format this year. So I've actually been doing a little bit less than I was in prior. But I'll tell you, it's a divisive, angry, heated year. And Star Wars is unfortunately no exception, just by the nature of the fandom and the way that works.
Oh, heated is definitely a word you can use for this fandom, and we are going to get into that even deeper in a bit, but I wanted to whet everyone's appetite for a second. Now, before we get back into our major discussion with Steven all about some of the politics of our favorite Star Wars books and things like that, a couple things we want to address about the show itself. Corey, we had some really amazing overlays added to the show last week and this week, and we really messed up last week because we didn't say who made them.
Yes,
so who made all this amazing stuff we've done?
We totally dropped the ball last week because everything went to hell, as it usually does whenever we launch something new. But yeah, you guys are obviously taking a look at the new system, the new layout we have. We're streaming exclusively to Twitch now. We're going to be integrating with a lot of cool stuff on Twitch. And we've had a lot of really cool graphics, the new intro, it all looks super professional, and that is all due to Ryan Holland, who is our video graphics designer over at Utini, and he's done an absolute killer job. So he's built all these overlays, all the intro, the animated logo you see on our YouTube channel. It's going to be deeply involved in the Utini game night, which we're launching pretty soon. I'm going to talk about that here in a second. But Ryan has absolutely been integral to all of that, and it continually amazes me the incredible talent that we somehow attract here at Utini. So, Ryan, we're forever grateful to you, and I know our community is as well.
Absolutely. It really blows me away that the bar for entry to Utini has gotten so much higher since Charles and I signed on. No, Corey, you already go right in and tell the people what the Utini game night is going to be this week. Briefly, so we can shoot through the rest of the stuff before we get back to the main show.
Yes, absolutely. So we've talked about it previously on the show. We're launching Utini Game Night, which once a week we're going to get together live on Twitch, stream some Star Wars games. This is going to be a great way to meet a whole bunch of other folks on the Utini team. I am launching the first night of this myself on Wednesday night, 7 p.m. I'm going to be playing, I think, some KOTOR is what I'm pretty sure I've decided on.
Nice.
Wonderful.
Did some testing
Great
today.
choice.
So 7 p.m. Wednesday, we'll see you guys there.
Sounds awesome. That will be every night. Wes is also you're helming that, man. You're getting the schedule together. I have promised to watch the intro videos. I have not, but a lot of people have, and they're going to be coming to you live on Twitch. So check that out on Wednesdays. Couple Patreon updates. We got 3 new patrons this week, everyone. I'm freaking blown away. Thank you so much to Michael Carpentier. Michael, thanks. We also have Sam and Bria Flanahan. So the 3 of you, welcome to the Utini family. So excited for you to check out everything we got over at patreon.com/Utini, extra shows, behind the scenes content, that stuff. Charles, we may be featuring them soon in this new segment we're going to do called Patron of the Week. Can you remind us what that is and show us the first ever Patron of the Week segment?
I can. So just briefly for anyone that wasn't here last week, we are starting this new segment, Patron of the Week, where we want to highlight one of our patrons, because y'all are awesome. We want to say thank you and get you on the show. So Michael, Sam, Bria, maybe it could be you next. This week, it is Timothy. If you are interested in doing what Timothy is about to do, then send us a quick video clip, audio clip, or just a few paragraphs written, and we can read that on the show to highlight you and say thanks. So let's go ahead and roll Timothy's video.
What is up, everybody? My name is Timothy Guthrie. I am the Patreon manager here at Utini. I am very excited to be officially welcoming in the Patron of the Week segment to the Living Force. Last week, Charles and the guys did a fantastic job of explaining what it is, and this is kind of going to be an example video. So, as I said, my name is Timothy, and I currently live in Knoxville, Tennessee, and I have been a Star Wars fan for as long as I can remember. 2 distinct memories that I have growing up with Star Wars include playing the Rogue Squadron Nintendo 64 game with my grandpa. We used to absolutely wear that thing out. And then I remember sitting in the theater to watch The Phantom Menace when it first came out. I was like 6 or 7 years old, and it absolutely blew my mind. I loved everything about it, and I remember fighting my mom for weeks trying to get my name legally changed to Anakin. Unfortunately, it didn't work out, but I still nonetheless think back on those moments, especially with the love and hate that they've received over the years, and I know that was a genuine love, and I've really come to reconcile that recently. So two of my favorite things about Star Wars right now, and probably ever, my favorite film is Empire Strikes Back, and my favorite novel is Bloodline by Claudia Gray. Both of those stories are my favorites, I think, because they put our heroes in the midst of defeat, in the midst of trauma, and they both paint a picture of hope at the end of their stories. So they remind me that no matter how difficult life gets, no matter what people say about you, what background you come from, you can always achieve great things, and you can do it with your friends. So I'm very grateful for that. And I'm really appreciative of the Teeny community. I've been a fan for a little over a year, and I've been a patron for about 7 or 8 months. And I just absolutely love supporting positivity and being a part of a community of like-minded individuals who just want nothing but the best for each other and for this franchise that we love so much. I do have 2 questions to end that I want to ask the hosts. Corey, if you could say one positive thing about Core and Horn, and it has to be legitimate, what is it? And 2, for everyone else, what is it that brings you guys back week to week to do this show? Obviously, I love listening to it. A lot of us are here because of the positivity, but I wanted to know if there was anything in particular that brought you guys back week after week. So thanks, guys. Enjoy the show.
Oh, wow. Thank you, Timothy, so much. That was an awesome segment. I'm really glad we had you on to kick off that segment. Can't wait to get some more patrons highlighted on there. And great questions. I think we're probably going to need to give Corey a second to think of a nice thing to say about Core and Horn.
The rest of the show, maybe.
The rest of the show. So I will just say quickly, for me, it's really easy why I keep doing this. The camaraderie. I did not grow up with friends who are big Star Wars fans, and now you guys are all my brothers in the fandom. And Steven, now you're included in this too, man. So the family's growing every week, and that keeps me coming back for sure.
Yeah, and I'm actually gonna throw this to you, Steven, as well. You can be part of this. So for your show, even though I know you've taken some time to like retool and stuff, what is it that keeps bringing you back to making content in Star Wars?
The fact that the Star Wars analogies in the world of politics never stop coming. I mean, there's not going to be a single month that somebody doesn't tweet, "This is how democracy dies," with thunderous applause to whatever is in the news that they don't like. It keeps me coming back, and it keeps me realizing that if you are having a hard time talking to people about what's in the news, you can talk to them about it through Star Wars. And come to more common ground than I think sometimes politics allows.
Dang. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
oh,
like,
man. We should have been on the show a long time ago, Steven.
I was looking at you. Well, I'm going to jump off of that and go back to a little bit of what Charles said for me to answer your question, Timothy. I come on this show because I just freaking love doing it. I mean, Star Wars is so applicable, like you're saying, Steven, to everyday life. And I learn so much just by talking it out. I learned so much about my favorite books by talking them out with you guys. But really, I mean, it's a chance to hang out with some of my best friends and talk about the thing that I like. So, and the fact that we have all of you all that are listening and watch and talk in Discord and Twitch, like, it's so fun to have a group of people that are in love with the same thing talk about it. So that brings me back easily. Corey, I'm going to give you one more segment to think about your Core and Horn answer, because Wes, I want to ask you, thank you, Cheryl, for calling Wes out. Wes, what brings you back here every week, dude? Besides the fact that we need you, or else we would not have, none of this would work. It would all be broken.
Well, much like what Charles said, I don't have a lot of Star Wars fans. I remember in college, I had just started really getting into the movies, and I just heard about the books that my one of my college buddies was like, I'm getting rid of a bunch of stuff because I'm moving. Do you want like some of this box of stuff? And I was like, what's in your box of stuff, man? And it was all his Star Wars movies. And I was like, you throwing these away, you fool? So there are very few of my friends that actually got on the Star Wars board. Once I joined up with you guys, there's been a lot of people that have turned over a new leaf, I guess you could say, and started reading the books and asking me questions. And I'm like, why are you so interested? It's like, because kind of you're interested. And I was like, all right, man, it's rubbing off. So That's why I keep coming back, so I can spread this disease.
Well, you know what? You are the king of the rats, and the rats have now been fed. There you go. We're very happy you're here, Wes. Corey, you've had some time. You've had some insightful talk from Steven. You've had some sappy talk from me, Charles, and Wes. What's a good thing about Cornhorn?
Well, I've had to turn to the Wikipedia article to try to find something redeeming about the character, and unfortunately, there's not very much. See, even my dogs don't want me to talk about Cornhorn. Well, I mean, his lightsaber looks pretty cool. I guess there's that.
That's something.
His initials are pretty great.
Yeah.
Nah.
Sounds like a very all right. Well, there we go, Timothy. Thank you for that. And again, every week we're going to be highlighting another patron. So if you want to send in a video, you want to send in some questions, we'd love to have it. All right, last couple things before we get talking about our main points this evening. Book releases. We'd like to keep you guys abreast of all the book releases that are coming your way soon. As a reminder, August 25th, we got the Clone Wars Stories of Light and Dark, the anthology book. September 1st, we got Thrawn Ascendancy, Chaos Rising. I know we got a lot of Thrawn heads waiting for that one. We have From a Certain Point of View, The Empire Strikes Back, coming November 10th. And today, we found out, it's not confirmed through StarWars.com, but it's found on Amazon. It's found in a bunch of places. The third Alphabet Squadron book is coming March 2nd, 2021. So I can't wait. I'm going to cry a lot. It's going to be really emotional, but make sure, head over to Utini, get those pre-orders in. All right, we are skipping book reviews this week because we got a lovely guest we want to talk about some politics with right now. Before we do, West, we're going to do a quick ad spot, show you about some merch you can get through the Utini store, and then we're going to come back and talk politics with Steven. All right, and we are back. Lovely little break. Corey's dogs are still going crazy because they're so excited. They can't handle it. But now let's talk about it, guys. Politics in Star Wars has never been a foreign concept. Lucas has always been pretty transparent about thoughts he's had about fascist regimes, about war, about things like that. Has always been present in the Star Wars mythos. So, Steven, obviously, when we first heard about your show, it's like, oh, that makes complete sense because of all the things you said earlier. I mean, it's always going to be relevant. It's always going to be something that we can talk about in the modern day and something that we can use to understand politics better through a modern lens. So, guys, I want to open up to all of us on all these talking points. When you think Star Wars politics, what's the first thing that you think of? Do you think of like the Senate? Do you think of a specific item? Do you think of modern day stuff? What twinges in the old brain space?
I'll leave it to y'all to go first. I got thoughts.
Excellent. You're going to be our cleanup hitter.
Man, that's
baseball's
tough.
back.
I think maybe for me it's probably just episode 1 because that's when I really understood, politics was coming in, and that was the first, movie that I was around for as well. So that's probably part of it. But I think it was kind of thrust a little bit more into the spotlight outside of obviously the big bad empire, which is ever present in the original trilogy. But, seeing more of the exact fallout, I think, from some of the governmental bodies, and seeing a queen and how, she still has to go to a Senate that's like for the entire galaxy, like all of those kind of workings where you really, really see up close and personal the workings of the government in Star Wars. That's my first thought. And I think the poster is pretty fitting for that reason.
Absolutely, man. I actually want to jump on that exact same thing. I'm going to second you before we go over to Corey. Phantom Menace is, I think derided by some fans by being like, oh, it's the one with the crawl about the trade dispute. Like, yeah, that's the easy joke. But I think that the politics brought up in Phantom Menace get more impressive to me every single year. I mean, I'm getting, we get older, we get more appreciative of stuff. But I really do think of that kind of stuff and how a galactic government has to work together and how there's inter-strife, but it's all done through intelligent means. Like they have to divert each other through bills and through governmental planning and how wars are fought on different fronts. So I think that's the cool thing that Star Wars does. And obviously, guys, I think of our Lord and Savior Bail Organa, who's possibly the greatest politician who's ever been in any galaxy fictional or
Yes,
non-fictional.
possibly.
So,
Yes.
boom, there we go. Corey, anything else you want to add before we give it to the ringer?
Yeah, the last. Sorry, guys, my wife just got home, and Ray and Kylo are going crazy here. Come on, calm down.
They can smell politics is about.
Apparently,
They're like,
apparently, exactly.
We would never do this.
Yes. So I guess when I kind of think of politics, my head really just goes to like the bureaucracy of it all, right? I mean, like the Clone Wars is such a fantastic story, I think, because of it really highlights the challenges of very large government and like the bureaucracy of what happens. And like I can only imagine like how challenging it is to get anything done in galactic politics in the Senate, right? I mean, we have the United States politics and our Senate can't get squat done, right? So like I can only imagine what it's like. If you can feel, I like that you brought up the Phantom Menace, because you can feel the sort of helplessness of Padme, like when she goes before the Senate, of how like it's just so huge and like the wheels are just turning and there's all this greed and corporations are all involved and it's just such a huge mess. And it's just a really politics, you know, they're so wrapped up in Star Wars. Like there's no way to discuss Star Wars without discussing politics. Like it's just so integral to the story.
Absolutely. Steven, what do you think?
Well, I think everything that y'all laid out is completely correct. I mean, when you think like the politics of Star Wars, the first thing I think you envision, right, is that Senate chamber. It's really cool, right? And that kind of captures what you're talking about when you think about the politics of Star Wars. But I want to go to episode 2 and what I think the politics of Star Wars really all stem from, which is the conversation that is had between Anakin and Padme in the field of Naboo before they're really awkward rolling in the grass.
Excellent.
Where they're discussing Padme's career. He's kind of making fun of her. And I don't know the quotes verbatim or line by line, but he's discussing how he thinks the system should work. He's frustrated. He goes, I think people should get together and discuss the problems and then decide what's in the best interest of the people and come to an agreement. And she goes, well, that's what we do. The problem is that people don't agree. Well, they should be made to. And that to me is what Star Wars, every trilogy, is about. And it's also what politics is about, and frustration that you can't control everything. And you see that in Anakin's life stem throughout the prequels. It gets much more violent after his mother is killed. He says, you know, I should have the power, all the power that I need to control the things around me. He throws the thing across the room on the bunker on Tatooine.
Yeah.
And when I think about politics, I think about that frustration. People want the world to be a certain way or be better, and they get angry when they can't do it. And that's what Star Wars is all about. It's about what are you willing to give up and do, possibly that is immoral, to make those things reality.
Right. And I think that's one of the interesting conversations that really continues today. I mean, you have things like the subreddit Empire Did Nothing Wrong, right? Which is, I mean, admittedly a bit of a joke subreddit, but posits the idea in a very, you know, I think a humorous sense that, hey, are you willing to give up some of these freedoms? Because look at all this order that we have. And like you said, it goes from Empire directly to the First Order. That's like, if we can rule the whole galaxy, then everyone will be at peace. And I think we see that in a lot of the books, right, guys? Like, we read these books and there's planets you can visit in the literature that have no idea the Empire is actually bad, because they're like, I don't know, you know, my grain gets delivered on time.
Right.
I'm safe.
Right.
And it's a hard conversation that I think you're right, is getting more pressing every day, isn't it?
And may I comment real quick on the you know, Empire Did Nothing Wrong subreddit?
For sure.
You know, it's funny, right? Like it's kind of this tongue-in-cheek joke in Star Wars fandom. It was started by a writer in the Weekly Standard. I can't remember who. But the article is always cited as the beginning of this sort of trollish pro-Empire aspect of the fandom, beyond people who actually do like Empire cosplay, actually advocating and making the case for why the Empire did nothing wrong in taking out the rebellion. This is part of a broader theme in Star Wars, where they struggle to communicate in many ways why the alternative to the Empire is necessarily good. A lot of what people get frustrated with in politics is when you tell them their viewpoint is evil, but you can't exactly qualify how yours is not
going to do
harm to others. And so there's this sort of trollish assumption like, well, then we should challenge like the rebellion and actually ask them, what do you believe in besides overthrowing the empire? And Star Wars books have done a great job of fleshing that out. And I'm sure we're going to get to all that here and more.
Absolutely. Well, hey, I'm going to use that natural segue to go here. So we have picked a couple books. Stephen, we spoke earlier this week about some of your favorite Star Wars political books, and there's some of the top books, honestly, that a lot of people in our community have read. So I'm assuming a lot of you in the chat, a lot of you listening at home are very familiar with these titles. And I kind of want to touch on a few because a lot of Star Wars books touch on politics, but a few of them touch on some very specific concepts exceptionally well. So I want to touch, first of all, on the book I have next to me here in the camera shot for all of you watching live, which is Inferno Squad, the Battlefront 2 book starring Iden Versio in her time before the far too short but very excellent campaign of Battlefront 2. And its relation to radicalizing extremists and to radicalizing people based on tragedy, right? Now, Stephen, I'm going to keep throwing this to you as the guest and expert on this stuff. How do you think Star Wars deals with showing how easily someone can become radicalized for either faction?
Well, beyond the radicalization question, Star Wars, in the original trilogy, its foundation is how quick and easy it is to fall to the dark side. But the dark side is not described as this thing that has like a natural set of ideas or beliefs. It is, like Yoda said, it's the quick road. It's the easy way. It's the way that makes you feel the most gratified. That's like what the dark side is really all about, is that gratification. And in Inferno Squad, you're presented with a fractured rebellion. We actually are getting a very clear look at all the ways in which the rebellion is split. And this is hinted at in other Star Wars properties like Rebels and Rogue One, right? Everybody crowded around the table arguing. But we know that there's Saw Gerrera's partisans. These are the guerrilla fighters who do not want to abide by, you could say, like the neoliberal idealism of Mon Mothma and the idea that we need to return to the ways of the Republic. Saw Gerrera believes the Republic to have been evil, and he believes that that is not a system worth restoring. He's a true revolutionary in the sense that he wants to tear everything down and build something new. And then after he is killed, his followers, they break off into a more extreme sect called the Dreamers. And this is where you get into really radical, violent politics. And Star Wars is basically asking the question, what are you willing to do to achieve your ends? And who has a monopoly on virtue? The answer is almost no one.
Yeah. And now I want to open this up to Corey, Charles, you guys as well. When we're talking about Inferno Squad, we're talking about the Dreamers, right? And their extreme methods. And we see them through the eyes of Iden, who is, we know, eventually going to defect to the rebellion. We know that we are meant to believe because she's a Star Wars protagonist, she must inherently have some good in her. I think that's one of the admissions we make about Star Wars. Even if we meet someone that's on the dark side in a book, likely they have some doubts. They have some good in them because it's Star Wars. It's ultimately for kids. We can't teach them to be fascists. But what did you guys think about the portrayal of the Dreamers in this book? Do you think that it was Christy Golden, I believe? Yeah, Christy Golden. Do you think she did a good job at showing how extremism can be, well, I guess for lack of a better phrase, extreme, even if it's meant for quote unquote the right reason? What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think that Golden did a particularly good job in this book, for me as a reader, making me feel uncomfortable with who I thought were supposed to be the good guys, right? And I think a lot of canon Star Wars has done this, where they kind of take it one step further and say, are these still the good guys? Are these still the good guys? Are these still the good guys? As you kind of walk down that path of radicalism. And it's interesting because you could ask the same question about the Empire. What it kind of boils down to, I think, with the Empire, with the rebellion, the Dreamers, whoever it is they have this ideal, right? And then they have how they execute it. And a lot of times the ideal itself is great, even if you are talking about the Empire, right? Having more unity amongst all the systems, having security. having a strong military against something like the Yuzhan Vong, who would come in, and try to invade your section of space. But then you look at how those things are carried out and how a few bad apples can kind of topple that into something evil. And the entire thing is just such an interesting thought experiment, to tie it to modern day politics. It's fun even thinking about this. But yeah, it's, I think that with Inferno Squad in particular, Golden did a fantastic job. It made me uncomfortable, and I think that was the point.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that's one thing that we're also learning a lot in modern politics, right? Is that we're living in an age where everyone has the opportunity to be a little more informed, which means that everyone has the opportunity to be a little more uncomfortable. Because when you don't know certain things, certain factions are doing, you can really live in a bubble of being like, well, I didn't know that, so I can sleep just fine. Or I didn't know this fact, so I'm a little more okay with it. Whereas the more informed you are, whether it is in real life or it's in Star Wars, like, I mean, we see in Lost Stars, the more when Thane learns what the Empire really is, okay, I'm out. Whereas Sienna's like, I think I can compartmentalize this a bit and stay in. And each character kind of has their own moral compass. And I find that to be really interesting to compare to people in real life, because I think everyone does find their own breaking point, right?
Yeah.
I am okay with so much.
And
then I learned something.
And that's kind of like what Star Wars canon has continued to seek to do, much to the chagrin of, I think, certain elements of like Star Wars Twitter, right? Is they keep humanizing imperial figures. And the reason is because Star Wars is always committed to reminding you, and it's George Lucas trying to remind himself that he doesn't want to become his father, that you too can become the Empire. And there are lots of good reasons that people supported the idea of empire. And it's the Clone Wars. The Clone Wars was horrific. It was a horrific human, alien tragedy that killed millions and millions of people. And the galaxy was war weary. They wanted it to stop. And they wanted, this idea of order. And they were willing to do anything to have it so that their planets weren't going to be ravaged by war. And then you find these characters, and like Iden Versio is one of them, and you mentioned the folks in Lost Stars, is when their idealism breaks down, when they actually see past the reason they signed up for this. Are they willing to accept the truth, or are they going to equivocate? And equivocation is kind of where politics goes to die, is where you're just like, well, they did this, so I'm going to do this too. I've been on Twitter all week arguing with conservatives about the president's executive order regarding coronavirus aid money, which he doesn't have the authority to delegate. It's not an executive power. And they're going, but Obama. And I'm like, does Obama define that you thought you were a conservative? And so, and that's the way this goes, is when you are actually met with like your worldview falling apart, are you going to equivocate, or are you going to accept the truth?
Yeah. Well, hey, you know what? Let's take that and let's jump into another book. Speaking of the Clone Wars, right? Lately we have talked a lot on this show about E.K. Johnston's Padme books, both Queen's Shadow and Queen's Peril. Exceedingly political, but exceedingly character driven, especially in Shadow, where we see a lot of Padme in the Senate. We see a lot of Padme, again, having that frustration we talked about earlier, wanting to start off to do good and realizing, oh my God, there's so much red tape. There are so many games I have to play. In order to free slaves, I have to pretend that I care about concrete mixture. Like there is so much stuff she has to go through in that realm. And guys, I actually want to go to Corey. I haven't thrown anything to you in a little bit. Now your dogs are chill. What do you think in this book specifically about frustration of a new politician? Because I think that nowadays we have a lot of younger people, like in our own generation, that are getting into politics. Younger. We have younger senators. We have younger representatives. We have younger people that are starting to vote for the first time, especially in this election. What can we learn about being a young, idealistic politician having to go into like this horrible system full of regulations?
Yeah, I think about this in my own political views a great deal. It's like there's a I don't know, a fine line, I feel like, between idealism and realism and cynicism. You know what I mean? Like,
Absolutely.
I have frequently been accused of being a cynic in my life, and I'm truly not. I'm just not an idealist in a lot of ways, I think. So, I think that in a lot of ways you want idealists leading the charge. I think it takes that young energy, that young blood, that that fierce passion that is you sort of lose, I guess, with time as you understand the system. I think it's probably healthy for political systems to have that type of influence in a lot of ways, and we certainly see that through Padme is by far the best example of this throughout Star Wars expanded universe. Is she's such a she never really loses sight of that. You know, she does play the games and go through the hoops and all that sort of thing, but she doesn't really lose sight of who she is in a lot of ways. And I think that's refreshing, and I hope that our current politicians can find that in some ways.
Yeah, I think it's really telling that Naboo is pitched as this like idealistic society, right? And it's simultaneously the society that Palpatine comes from, which is, you know, ironic in its own way, but also it is so successful and so peaceful, and its head rulers are all girls that are like 13 years old, and that is why they are so successful. Steven, does that I mean, obviously we think that was intentional, but what do you think that says about both Lucas's ideas about politics and kind of our evolution of politics starting like in 99 and on?
Well, I think a couple of things. So it was somewhat intentional to have Naboo's political structure look the way that it does in the movies and the books. You know, the idea of 13-year-old female rulers, by and large female rulers in Naboo, comes from Naboo valuing humility in their leaders. They value people who are curious, want to learn, don't have super set opinions, and are willing to take guidance. The ultimate political lesson of Padme comes in episode 1 when she is willing to kneel in front of Boss Nass and the Gungans and tell them that she needs, in fact, you know, we depend on you. Our fate is in your hands. And this is against a species who, based on E.K. Johnson's writing, were very much treated like the Native Americans to European colonists. They are very much divided, and the Gungans were very much victimized by Naboo colonists. And so with that in the backdrop, you just really look at Padme as someone who is willing to humble themselves before others, accept that she doesn't know everything and needs others to succeed. And you need that in politics. I actually take a little bit of issue with the idea that idealists are what is always needed, because I think that idealists truly, truly believe in their ideas, and that requires them to reject every other idea on the table.
That's true.
I'm not a big fan of political idealists, but I respect the sentiment.
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, and interestingly, that's going to lead us to the third book I actually wanted to kind of touch on here before we go into some bigger questions. Political idealists that kind of think their own way is so great, mainly because of some stuff that's happened before. That's a very specific type of person we're seeing nowadays. We're seeing a lot of people that are looking back to the past and kind of becoming so obsessed with it that they are so reluctant to go forward. Like we see this with people in the U.S. that glorify the Confederacy at this point, that think that it is still something to be lauded, something to be praised, despite the fact that it makes modern day so difficult, and it has a lot of horrible connotations for modern day people. And we see this in Claudia Gray's Bloodline, which Timothy actually mentioned as being his favorite canon book.
Yeah.
It is a tremendous novel. But it has a lot of, and Stephen, this is your phrasing I'm going to use here, neo-imperial nostalgia, especially with Ransom Calsterfo. Like, he has all the Imperial helmets. He has the Imperial uniforms. He's like, oh, I'm just a collector. And it is really written like someone, you know, you go into someone's house and they got a bunch of Nazi paraphernalia around. And I thought that was a strong image that was so crazy. In a book written only a couple of years ago, why do you think, Stephen, we're rounding back on that a little bit in relation to things like monuments, in relation to things like an over-reliance on the past instead of a hope for the future?
Yeah, so I just was blown away when I read Bloodline and we got to the part about Ransom Casterfo keeping Imperial relics in his office and the flag in his desk, and how that felt when Leia encountered those materials. Because I believe at the time that came out, I think the most recent major Confederate kind of flag scandal or controversy was in Charleston in South Carolina after the church massacre in Charleston. And that was when then Governor Nikki Haley took the move to remove Confederate flags from state grounds. And so now we're in a huge fever pitch of this debate. But this has obviously been going on for decades. And I thought what was just so striking about Ransom Casterfo was that he was victimized by the Empire. He was somebody who lost his parents in Imperial labor camps. He hated Darth Vader and the Emperor. But in general, he was somebody who did not like the idea of chaos. He was drawn towards the idea of the centrist party in the New Republic, which believed in centralized government, that everybody needed to adhere to a certain set of rules in the order of the Republic. Where Leia led the populist party, which was more like every planet should have its own systems and laws and regulations and whatever, and they can do their own thing. We have this argument all the time in the States. It's federalism versus central government out of DC.
Right.
It's all very familiar.
Yes.
Yeah. And it's interesting because, I don't think it's too far of a stretch to say that a lot of Star Wars politics generally, especially recently in the books, go a little more left, a little more liberal than right. But when you speak like that, the way a lot of conservatives, like true conservatives will describe it, they want states, they want what Leia's saying. They want a more populist idea. They want the states to kind of control their stuff, the federal government to get out of my life. Yeah. And it's funny.
In
theory, exactly, right? These are all, as far as theoretical practices go. So I think that's also interesting in Star Wars, that it's able to assign different political lines of thinking to different characters, regardless of if they're a good character or a bad character. And I think that can help with dialogue, because that's
I like to always say, like in Bloodline, I mean, Leia is being slightly neoconservative in her paranoia about the rising First Order and extremism in neo-imperial movements. She is raising the alarm that there's a real threat out there, the Amaxine warriors, and that they're funding a rebellion operation, which turns out to be the First Order, and no one will listen to her. And then what happens? They're all blown up by a weapon of mass destruction. And you take that and her professed support for the idea of a decentralized galaxy where every system can do its own thing. And you go, okay, well, I mean, Star Wars skews left in its ideas, and I think its writers and talent, and I think that's totally fine. But Leia oddly took on this sort of weird, modern, or actually like 1990s conservative idea and vibe. And that's worth entertaining and talking about. It's fun.
Absolutely. It's really a more intellectual, philosophical, conservative perspective, and I've certainly always appreciated that about Princess Leia's character in the books. Has kind of always been like that in a lot of ways, and we certainly saw that throughout Bloodline, is her own internal dialogue with like, what does it mean? I mean, she sort of asked the question in a lot of ways, is she wrong? Like if I remember correctly, some of the internal dialogue she had about Casterfo was like, maybe I'm overreacting, maybe he's just a collector, maybe this is not a big deal. Like it's very much an internal dialogue. Yeah. Even a character like Princess Leia is not so certain of her own ideology, that it's refreshing to see that in a character.
And I think the lesson that is important to try to take away from Ransom Casterfo is that, he holds on to these imperial relics because in general, he supported the idea of the empire, the stated idea,
the idea,
unified system, peace, order, rule of law. And we obviously know where that went. And he's like, oh, well, they went too far, but what if we tried again? And there are so many people in our world, left and right, who want to try ideas from the 20th century that failed. And there are millions of dead bodies to account for those bad ideas. Right. But yet people still continually want to litigate those ideas of these like 1940s and 1950s regimes.
And it's interesting to see, like on that point, I think it's also interesting because, you have the people that say, well, we wouldn't do it like that again. There's no way. Like, and it's this idea.
That didn't work because of these individuals and because of Stalin. He was a corrupt asshole, right? Like,
it also this. I feel like this dialogue also comes from a place of extraordinary privilege. And I think as four white guys talking about Star Wars right now, we're no strangers to privilege. And I think there is an element of that comes across in the modern day politics of like, well, I want to entertain this thought experiment because it won't really affect me too much. I can allow myself to entertain a thought because I'll probably be okay. And in Star Wars, I also think that's very interesting because you have the people from these planets, like in the Senate, right? Our grand political image we talked about earlier. We have these senators that think that this thing might work on this backwater planet, but I'm not going to go to Tatooine. Who cares? Whereas you have Padme, who comes back from Tatooine and is like, I had no idea slavery was still a thing. I had no idea that this actually happened everywhere else. We have to fix this. And a lot of the politicians are already like, nah, I don't know if I see that. But I always find that interesting to kind of compare. But as we kind of get to end of this hours and 10 minutes already, which is insane. I've loved this talk, but I want to ask you guys some general questions away from specific books. Steven, I want to throw you here and say, do you believe personally that Star Wars books going forward, we're getting a lot of new authors of various backgrounds, of various ideologies. It's really, really great as opposed to, the 90s and 80s. There's like 4 types of people that can write Star Wars books.
Yeah.
But do you think going forward, Star Wars books have any kind of political duty other than escapism, because they are being given to people of all ages, to maybe some younger readers that are learning about the world? What do you think?
Yeah, they do have a duty, and Star Wars has never shied away from this. I think more than in the recent Disney trilogy, but Star Wars and Lucasfilm in general, books in particular, are very bold in taking on autocracy, taking on the need for democratic government. And we are in a moment where autocratic governments are rising all across the world. Left, right, and center. Like, populism is tearing our political fabric apart. And we need to figure out a way to come back to a moderate middle, right? And a system where people actually believe the government's working for them and believe that your vote counts. And Star Wars can do this. And Star Wars has been doing this for 40 years. So I'm very excited about the stories they're going to continue to tell. I'm curious what they'll do in the Old Republic context, most of all, to teach us about politics. But I think more than anything, Star Wars reminds us not to alienate the other. And at the end of the day, I think that's what goes wrong in politics so much. It just depends on who the other is to you.
Without question. God, and honestly, on that, man, I want to ask you one last question before we let you get out of here. Looking ahead, like you said, 2 things like the High Republic, 2 things like the ending of the Alphabet Squadron, which you mentioned earlier, that is shied away from politics at all. Do you think that there is a chance that, or a likelihood even, that the books going forward will get even a little more, for lack of a better phrase, blunt or outspoken about the modern day parallels? I mean, we don't want to get to the point where, like, the bad guy in a High Republic book, he has very orange skin and is very rich. Like, that's annoying and like, right. And lazy writing. But do you think that there is going to be a point where some of the writers who, again, are very outspoken online or are very active politically, get to a point where, like, okay, enough is enough. I've been given this license. Let me be really obvious about what we should do.
I mean, I think that is always a risk. Star Wars works and changes people's hearts and minds when it is used in an analogous way. The more literal it gets, the more it feels like a weapon in favor of some people and against others. Writer Chuck Wendig, I think, really ran into the meat grinder on this. Just in the way that he would act and talk about politics on Twitter, and ended up costing him his job. And I think that Star Wars and Lucasfilm, just as a company, is really committed to keeping a broad audience. That's what makes Star Wars successful. So they need to be careful of having their affairs governed by social media bubbles, and instead appealing to the broadest amount of people possible in the country.
Absolutely. Well, we are going to be here for all of it. I'm reading the chat here. The people have been loving this talk. I hope you are all going to subscribe to Beltway Banthas, because my God, with the election coming up in November, man, this conversation has been so fun. I can only imagine what you're going to be talking about.
We got a new episode. We're coming out with a new episode. We're going to be switching to a monthly model for the next couple of months. And this next one is really exciting. It's called What Star Wars Didn't Teach Us. And it's going to be an hour-long narrative episode about what Star Wars taught us about democracies and how they fall, but also what it didn't, and why that might be blinding us to the way in which our own democracy in this moment might be crumbling, because we're always looking for Palpatine. And in fact, it might be more insidious than even that in reality.
My God. Well, if that wasn't the most enticing plug you've heard all week, I don't know what you're doing. Now that's the episode we are all waiting for already. But before we let you dip out of here and get to some Shark Week action, would you mind plugging where people can find you, both online, on Twitter, what podcast places can look for, all that stuff, to make sure they get your content as quickly as they can?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Steven with a PH _Kent89 and at Beltway Banthas. We're part of the RetroZap podcast network. And the best way to really get in touch with what we're doing is sign up for our newsletter, because that's where we really communicate with everybody. One about the politics of Star Wars, cool op-eds that are out there in the world of politics and Star Wars, and then just let you know when stuff is coming. So follow us on Twitter, and then we'll funnel you over towards those other things, get you involved in the Beltway Banthas podcast, where we are positive and excited about the politics of Star Wars and never treat it as taboo, divisive, or threatening.
It couldn't be more perfect if we tried. Joxy in our Twitch chat just linked an Apple podcast to Beltway. So y'all go ahead, click that now. Steven, we're going to finish up here. You go ahead, cancel out of the Zoom. We'll be just fine. Have a great night, and we'll get you back on here sooner rather than later.
Sounds good. May the force be with you.
May the force be with you, Steven. We appreciate it. All right. Well, now it's just the three of us, guys. This IQ of this show got a lot lower just now. That was a blast, was it not?
An absolute blast, man.
That was so fun.
I tell you what, I think I just found my new favorite podcast that I'm gonna have to
You're
absolutely
telling me.
subscribe to. Fantastic, man. I love that the expanded universe. It really is all about expanding on more than just like. I've never really thought about the EU as expanding on ideology or expanding on your own personal growth and that sort of thing. There's a lot of interesting folks out there that can really bring new perspectives to Star Wars, and it's super exciting to have another dude that's so fantastic in the community that's doing some really great work. So absolutely check out his show, and man, I'm gonna get on his email list too.
Yeah, and everyone, we are going to be doing everything we can to bring on more people like Steven onto this show that have really cool things to say about the expanded universe, because again, we love talking about it. We love expanding on, what kind of ships or like what, or who is father. Like, that's a good time. But the more voices we can have on here, the better. So next week, we're going to be having on Alice and Laura from Force Toast. We had them on last year when we were just starting out. They have exploded in the last year. So we're so excited to talk to them about what they've been up to. Have a ton of laughs, have a few drinks. It's going to be a really great night. So we will see you back here next Monday, 7 p.m. Eastern for that. And again, the audio will be going on for Patreon on Thursday and regular audio on Friday. Before we get out of here officially, I want to remind you guys, Corey, Wednesday night, what should everyone be doing on Twitch?
7 p.m. Eastern time. Come hang out with me on Twitch. We played some KOTOR. I'm probably going to play for a while. Speaking of which, just got a new follow. Appreciate that. Joe from Grindr.
Yes.
Excellent.
Followed. Thank
Excellent
you.
username there, buddy.
Yes.
That's fantastic. Wednesday, 7 p.m. Going to be hanging out, playing some KOTOR probably. It's going to be a big blast. Probably several hours, 2-3 hours of just gaming, hanging out. I'd love to get you guys in there. I know it'll be a blast. So we're going to start that tradition. And probably every single week, I think, we're going to play a huge variety of games. So it's going to be fun.
Absolutely. And if you want to be like Joe from Grindr, make sure you hit a follow on this Utini Twitch channel. Make sure you go head over to our YouTube channel. We didn't say it at the top, but they have been cranking out the reviews and videos like nothing else. We got new reviews and news articles over on utini.com on the website you guys can check out. Make sure you're all up to date on everything going Utini-wise. But my friends, that is going to do it for this week's episode of The Living Force.